there's this constant narrative that I find that it's conservative, biblically conservative Christians who are the divisive ones. We're the ones who are too political. We're using politics to divide the church and all of this kind of a thing. And so I wanted to talk about this because I thought that this article that appeared on the Atlantic website was just a really good avatar for the conversation that I hear happening right now. It's called "The Evangelical Church is Breaking Apart." And if you notice the title, I don't think you can see it probably on your screen, but in my tab at the top of the browser, what it says is Trump is tearing apart the evangelical church. Christians must reclaim Jesus from his church. And so the import of the article is to talk about how biblically conservative Christians are the ones who are dividing the church. It starts off here with a story about David Platt's church. I'm not going to read that because it's not the most important part of the article. I'm going to skip down to the about midway through the piece, and hopefully you can see this. And the author was talking to a sociology professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago, Michael Emerson. I don't know who he is. So here's some comments related to in this section. It says, the aggressive, disruptive, and unforgiving mindset that characterizes so much of our politics has found a home in many American churches. As a person of the Christian faith who spent most of my adult life attending evangelical churches, I wanted to understand the splintering of churches, communities, and relationships. I reached out to dozens of pastors, theologians, academics, and historians, as well as a seminary president and people involved in campus ministry. All voiced concern. I think everybody can agree that the pandemic has definitely placed strain on the situation. My theory is that all of these problems were under the surface. The pandemic and the social unrest of 2020 just simply brought them out into the open. That's my theory. And I think that the question is, what is splitting so many of our churches? And I think what's interesting to me is this section right here. The root of the discord lies in the fact that many Christians have embraced the worst aspects of our culture and politics. Okay, so notice how the setup is many Christians. Okay, who are these many Christians? When the Christian faith is politicized, churches become repositories of grace, not grievances. Okay, so notice the setup. Whoever he's going to talk about are the ones they've politicized it. They've become guided by grievances, not grace. They're the worst aspect of our culture. They places where tribal identities are reinforced, fears are nurtured, and aggression and nastiness are sacralized. Okay, so you see the set. There's a fairly negative setup. Nobody wants to be these things, right? The result is not only wounding the nation, it's having a devastating impact on the church. The historian George Marsden told me that political loyalties can sometimes be so strong that they create a religious-like faith that overrides, or even transforms a more traditional religious faith. The United States has largely avoided the most virulent expressions of such political religions. None has succeeded for very long, at least until now. Okay, so where is this taking us? Trump. Then came Donald Trump. When Trump was able to add open hatred and resentments to the political religious stance of true believers, it crossed a line. Tribal instincts seem to have become overwhelming. The dominance of political religion over professed religion is seen in how for many, loyalty to Trump has become a blind allegiance. The result is that many Christians, followers of Trump, have come to see the gospel of hatred, resentments, vilification, put downs, and insults as expressions of their Christianity, for which they too should be willing to fight. So it's interesting to me that the setup here is clearly one of conservatives are the problem. If you are trying to be a biblically faithful Christian, you are part of the problem. And do you notice the conflation between those who are divisive and a political issue of Donald Trump? Well, maybe there's another possibility available. Maybe we don't, many people can have many views of Trump. But our concern, my concern, and many of the people that I talk to are leaving their local churches. It has nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with other issues. It has to do with doctrinal fidelity. It has to do with positions that they feel like their pastor and their leadership team isn't taking a strong stand on, or that they're taking an unbiblical stand. And I think that it's so sad that, if anything, I think this article is conflating Trump with the politics. I'm not convinced that the problem is necessarily the conservatives. I think that there's definitely some energy behind pushing that narrative that conservatives are the problem, and then associating conservatives with Trump, and then Trump makes statements that are kind of inflammatory, and then ergo, this is where biblically faithful Christians are. But I don't think that that's the case at all. You can have a position about an issue that has nothing to do with Trump. There's things that I would agree with Trump's policies, and there's places I disagree with his policies. And I disagree with a lot about his character. Okay? So I don't think like that's a fair characterization whatsoever, is to say that that's the issue. I think Jonathan says it well, like Trump is a red herring. That's a good way of saying it. It's like, the fallacy of the red herring is that it gets you off the track to the major point. I think Trump gets us off the track. The major point, the big question is we want churches that are doctrinally faithful. People are leaving churches not because of Trump. I mean, yeah, there might be some people out there, but so many of the people that write into the ministry, like I can't remember one letter in the thousands of letters we've received from people who are leaving the churches. Anybody has ever told us we're leaving our church because our church isn't supporting Trump enough. I mean, in my data set, the author didn't interview me. That's not the issue. The issue is people have deep concerns about doctrinal fidelity, and that what they saw last year in 2020 was their church leadership not guiding them through a very difficult period in a biblically faithful way. I think that is a complete red herring. It is not the issue. The other thing that I want to show here, there's one more little quote I want to go over. It says here that it's not a problem limited to the faithful on one side of the aisle. This is true of both the Christian on the left and the right. So he's giving a little hat tip here Christians that are on the left, they also have these problems. So there's a couple of sentences here to try to look balanced, I think. People come to believe that they are most thoroughly and intensively catechized to believe. And that catechesis comes not from churches, but from the media they consume, or rather the media that consume them. The churches have barely better than a snowball's chance of hell of shaping most people's lives. Now, that's a position that I actually agree with. He says, they say earlier, many churches aren't interested in catechizing their people. And this is exactly goes back to my point earlier about topical messages. They instead focus on entertainment because entertainment is what keeps people in their seats and money coming in the offering plate. I actually agree with that. I think that the lack of teaching is a major problem. And if churches don't catechize their people, and if parents don't catechize their children, and to catechize is just to disciple them, to teach them the faith, the culture is ready, willing, and able to catechize you, your congregation, or your children. It will do it because one way or the other, people's minds are going to be shaped. They're either going to be shaped by scripture or by culture or some combination of that. And I think that that's absolutely true. The question is what is catechizing us? And I think that even though he only has a couple sentences there on, well, yeah, this is a problem for people on the left too. Well, thank you for admitting that, because it is a problem on the left. This political thing of, well, we shouldn't be political. That's a political conversation. I don't honestly know what that means. To tell me that to have a conversation about my position about human life having dignity, value, and worth, and that we shouldn't kill the most vulnerable among us, being the unborn. We shouldn't just kill them on demand. And for someone to tell me, well, that's politics, we can't talk about that. That's not politics. It is politics, and it's not. That's a profoundly theological idea. The politics part of it is, how do I bridge from the theology to public policy? Okay, so who cares? Who cares if that's political? If I want to have law enforcement go and try to spend efforts and resources to shrink human trafficking, I do that because it is profoundly based on a theological idea for that people shouldn't be coerced into sex slavery or any other kind of slavery. Like that's they shouldn't be kidnapped. There's laws about that in scripture. And yeah, I think that there should be public policies about that. Was that political? Of course it has political import. If I'm going to talk about policies related to any number of topics, to say that a conversation about the traditional family or about marriage being between a man and a woman, well, you can't talk about that. And I have literally been in meetings in conservative Christian spaces and told, we can't write on these topics because this is political. We can't pump out content on certain topics because this is political. The traditional human family, the traditional marriage, the meaning of human life, that's not political. It has political import. It has impact about policies. But these are deeply theological ideas. But I feel like there's this narrative. Well, only people who are have more liberal social policies and advocate more liberal social policies, then for them, what is that? That's not political. That's not a political idea. But it's only if you're a biblically faithful Christian or a conservative, only you can't talk about the policy aspect of it. That makes no sense to me. So I think that it's a complete red herring to say, well, you can't talk about that because that's political. That almost never happens to the person on the left. It is almost always the more conservative, the traditional, the biblically faithful Christian who wants to have a discussion about what Christians have always believed about XYZ issue. They're the ones that are told, well, this is too political. You can't talk about it. That almost never happens for people on the left. And it's like, why not? Like, let's just have the conversation. All right, you have XYZ belief that has political import. It has a policy import. Okay, let's talk about that. What is its connection to Scripture? How do you make that case theologically? How robust is that? What have Christians historically believed about that? What do the best bioethicists believe about that? How widely read are we on that issue?